No.
Okay.
All right, I'd like to call this meeting to order for the June 14th special meeting. Veronica, the roll please.
Ms. Boss? Here. Mr. Coleman?
Here.
Mr. Gray?
Here.
Mr. Lawrenson?
Here.
Mr. Murphy? Mr. Pederini?
Here.
Mr. Quinones?
Here. Okay. Pledge. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, did we get any public comments?
I did not see
I
any.
did not see any either. Anybody else see anything come in?
Where do those go? There's an email, right?
Everybody should
Everybody would.
be on that email. So
Okay.
anytime on the link on the website or that says email the board or contact the board, it goes to all of us.
Fine.
So we make sure no one misses it and everybody's getting the same information. So,
Sometimes they go straight to like you or something.
yeah, sometimes people will respond directly to me when I send out the reminder. And then we would read it in open session like this as a public comment. Or if they send it to any of you and said, can you please read that in public? We would do that, of course. But,
Good to know.
yep.
All right, so being no public comments, for the special meeting tonight, there's only one, action item. So we all saw the email update in regards to the asbestos. It's a little bit of discussion to be had in relation to what route we want to take with it. So, sounds like there's a couple different things to consider. Jason or Dr. Johnson, you want to give some more background?
Sure. I'm gonna try and pull up the, Dr. John's business office report, I think is the best spot to see that. Where did you wanna start, Dr.? It's probably
maybe with the maps.
here. Okay.
So the red area is where the damage was. So at the very minimum, it makes sense to me to do the area that's connected to that, directly to that area.
So this is all a hallway in here. This area is all hallway with a closet here.
And there's a closet at the end there on the left as well, yeah.
Yeah, closet there.
And then from 217 as well as the business office and then the offices across from it. The red squares.
Right, but
Yeah. The purple is the hallway.
purple's a hallway. And that is alternative number 2.
Yes.
So this would be alternative, this would be the base bid, would be just replacing this. This would be our one option. Then if we go to alternative 2, it would include all of this purple area, so everything connected to the original piece. And then if we go to bid alternate number 3 was, this is room 217.
Now 3 is the red squares.
I'm sorry.
It's okay. It's confusing.
Oh, I see, there's an alternate 1.
And then that's alternate 1. Is the
Oh,
green.
okay.
Oh. So there's base bid, alternate 1, alternate 2, and alternate 3 are these offices over here. And then 4 and 5. Alternate 4 is the wing. It's 4 classrooms. You go all the way that way. It's in the original section of the building, down where Spectrum used to be, and now it's Red Apple, and After School Club has a classroom in there. There's 4
There's a
classrooms.
tech room in there, yeah.
And then this area, alternate 5, would be the where Seagull has classrooms now. We call it the bridge, where it goes up a few steps and then goes across those 4 classrooms. This has already been done. a few years back when we remodeled.
And we did that at the same time we did the STEM lab.
So that means there was asbestos found there before?
Oh, we knew there was asbestos, but we had to replace a radiator with a univat. So I was able to use life safety money to do that portion of the job. So we went ahead and did that at that point, just so it was done. It's one of those things that this is actually the second time this year. We had one in February, and then the February we had the water in the lower level, and especially the hot water that came from the coil that burst in the univent damaged and caused the tile to pop up. Luckily, it was an area that wasn't heavily used, so we were able just to block that off and not use it. I guess one of the concerns I've got, and then the second time we had a pipe in the ceiling, was also an HVAC pipe that started leaking, went underneath the entry mat, and caused the tiles to actually kind of start coming apart. None of them, I don't think, were totally popping up, but they were kind of separating, which then at that point if we had taken that off and let people walk across it without being covered, then it would have been potentially dangerous, because anytime the fibers get into the air is when you have a hazard.
Yeah.
But that's twice this school year that we've had something occur. So we kind of looked at, what could we do, and then what would it take to do everything? If we do all 5 alternates, the asbestos abatement cost is $122,950. And then the flooring for all of that is $237,690.
Stephen, I have a question. So I saw that we did multiple vendors bidding for the asbestos. Why don't we have multiple vendors bidding for the flooring?
We used it's one of those because of a supply issue as well as the lack of time to do a bid. That we chose to go with a consortium bid. So it was bid, but it was bid by Sourcewell Consortium. So there was a bid that took place, but we are allowed to purchase through that cooperative purchasing agreement through their bid.
Got it.
Kind of like the state of Illinois has bids they do as well, and there are several consortiums. There's Sourcewell. There's one that used to be called U.S. Communities, and now it's changed its name to something else. When we did the playground, we did that through a group purchasing bid. So it is something that's allowable, and just because of the time frame, as well as knowing that a lot of, even the flooring for our lower level was delayed. So by going with this Sourcewell bid, we know what's in stock, and we know that they've kind of reserved it for us, so that if you decide tonight you want to do everything, we have a guarantee that we can get that flooring here within 2 to 3 weeks. Which will be about the time they'll be finishing up the asbestos abatement.
So am I correct in assuming that combined it'd be approximately 360,000?
Yeah, and with the
Consultant.
with the consultant's cost is $386,840,
Okay,
but we'll get $22,700 back from the insurance company.
so we're still around
So about
360
$360,
something.
yeah. And with this, we still would come back with, or we still would have about, about $400,000, anywhere $400,000 or $500,000 remaining in the capital projects
Okay,
fund.
projects.
I know one of the things Jason and I were bouncing around today was, well, what if something else happens? And,
Yeah, right.
And in addition to that, we also have $600,000 in the working cash that we can also either borrow against that, or we can permanently transfer it.
So for the alternatives here, are they broken out in the table anywhere where we could look at and say, okay, let's
I
go
attached it to the
with
email
the
I
base,
sent everyone.
obviously, and then each one, the alternate, okay? So there were 2 attachments?
I believe so.
Yeah.
I intended
Yeah.
to.
Yeah, there were 2 attachments. Here's the table.
I didn't have her attach that. Do you have that email I sent?
Okay,
Jason?
I got it. Sorry,
Okay.
it opened up as a table on mine.
Yeah.
Rather than a separate attachment, okay.
What's the time frame on this?
Okay, if we do everything, we would do the upper level of, the two-story, the red, and then that alternate base bid and alternates 1 through 3 will be done starting June 28th. Will be completed, I think it's July 16th. Calendar. July 16th, and then they could start putting the flooring in on July 19th. The second phase, which is the purple, which is the original building, would then begin immediately, and it would be completed July 23rd, and then we could start putting flooring in there July 26th.
How will this impact the students that are currently enrolled in summer school?
It wouldn't, because there aren't any of them that are in any of these areas. So all these areas are currently unoccupied this summer. The only impact would be June 28th. We still have ESY going on for 3 more days, because it ends, I think, the 30th. Is that right, Adam? ESY ends the 30th of June. Okay. More than likely, the first couple days are just going to be setting up the barriers and getting everything in place. But it is one of those that the last time we did the asbestos abatement, we had 1 week we did during spring break, and then the following week, kids were back, but we were still continuing the abatement. It's basically all sealed. They use, I can't remember if it's double or triple layers of plastic to separate it. They have to have a fan running that creates negative pressure, so nothing can get out of there. They've got a separate area that they go through for decontamination. They have a shower set up so that, you know, nothing that's coming from outside is impacted. I think they, I don't know if it's double or triple bag the asbestos that they're getting rid of. So there are all sorts of, you know, everything that the Illinois Department of Public Health requires is done, and somebody from the asbestos consulting company is monitoring that on a, you know, during the entire time that somebody's on site.
And this would remove all of the asbestos
Floor
that
tile.
we can get to.
Right. All the asbestos floor tile in the building. The only asbestos tile that wouldn't be removed is if there's anything underneath fixed casework or lockers. I know that when we looked in the lower level, there was it was just concrete underneath the lockers. We didn't actually pull up anything to look underneath this, but at that point, if like down the road you decided to replace the lockers, it's a small enough area that you can come in and they can do removal of that without having to go through the major process that we have to go through to replace larger areas. There's a specific guidelines that they can follow for just small areas that they're removing. And that's what we did in the 1961 edition. We had 2 rooms there, and then one room was room 217 that we had, where actually the floor and the foundation were somewhat, there was like a gap that was created or settling or whatever. And so the tiles were breaking off. So we, removed a couple rows of tiles and then replaced those. So with that, we didn't have to go through so we had like 2 rows in 3 different classrooms, and that allowed us to do that. Well, I think it's glove and bag or bag and glove process, as opposed to the full-on total enclosure.
Are they able to raise the lockers temporarily just to look and see what it's like while they're here?
It's not worth it a lot of the stuff in this building, even the casework, not only screwed but also glued to the wall. So for what it's the whole thing is you don't want it to be exposed.
Yeah.
If it's totally covered, there's not any hazard. So I'm comfortable not going that far. Just doing this, but knowing that if down the road we decide we're going to replace the lockers, then at that point you'd need to verify if there was asbestos underneath them. I mean, we still may be able to look, but with the time frame that we've got, you don't want to get into the fact where you're going to remove the lockers and put them back again.
you have any
I
other
mean,
thoughts?
it's a big investment, but I think part of what we're investing is not having disruption during the school year. And so it seems like doing it now really is gonna protect the kids from the stress. Even if we could accommodate it, it would be a stressful thing for them, and if our goal is protecting education and their bodies, this seems like a good investment.
And the long-term cost savings of doing this versus doing it piecemeal.
Yeah.
Yeah, anytime you do it piecemeal, there's, costs for them to mobilize on site, as well as the consultant, has certain fees that they charge, whether they're here for, 1,000 square feet or 10,000 square feet.
So is there a discount by doing a total? Because as I'm looking across, just adding up base bid all the way through all 5, it seems higher than that 386,840. So are they giving us something
No.
of a discount?
Now, with the asbestos abatement, they actually did it, each of those, and then we just add them up. There's no discount if we do more or less. And the flooring did it the same way we did the bid for the asbestos. So they did it the base bid, and then here's how much it is for adding this and adding the other, et cetera. So there isn't necessarily a discount, although one of the things we did tell the asbestos abatement companies is that, our goal was to do as much as we could afford to do at this point. And at the point we did the bid, I didn't know exactly how much money we were gonna have available.
Just adding up those columns, it comes to 422,299.
Which columns are you adding?
Base bid column for total cost.
Yeah, I got the same, wait,
Yeah.
somehow I got this right number though, I got the same, I got 386, let me try again.
Now, what are you adding?
Under total costs, looking at the columns for base bid through all 5.
Well, the base bid, if you did everything, the base bid is Kinsale, which is 122,950, plus 237,690. Yeah, so the total is 386,840, is that what you said?
No, I'm looking at 422,299.
You're adding alternate 4 and 5.
I got
again.
386.
Added
Yeah, so the total doesn't include,
this here, all of these.
No, this way, this one here, this one here.
Well,
and
yeah,
then
but
there.
I'm looking at total cost of everything, right? Because that includes the consultants. If we're right in reading all the way down, right?
Are we supposed to read left
What's the
or right?
problem?
Under total costs, if you look at total costs,
Jason, could you open up the spreadsheet?
So you're doing more than adding vertically, you're doing a horizontal,
I'm just looking at the total cost, which is at the base, at the very bottom, right?
yeah.
Total cost, and I'm just adding up the total of each column.
Yeah.
And I'm arriving at 422,299 instead of the 386,840. So that's why I was asking.
well, so are you saying that the total column is incorrect? Because if I take that total column, my
Yeah,
formulas
right
are
there.
correct, but.
So if we take a look at the total costs at the bottom, starting with 25,2, 54,575, 67,926, just adding those up, I'm getting a number higher than what's under the total. Yeah, higher than the
So
386.
tell me, what is it you're adding again? The 122,950,
No. I'm looking
are you,
He's going from the leftmost
from the left
lower.
where it says total cost. If we take a look at the far left, where it says total cost,
25.2.
my assumption is, yeah, that's what we would be adding together.
correct?
And then you're
Right.
doing less the deductible?
Well, no, I didn't even.
I didn't bother with the deductible.
Yeah.
Yeah, I didn't
So
bother
the-
with that.
You're
So-
about $40,000 off, so it's.
Yeah,
Oh, I see what you're saying, okay.
yeah.
Maybe I've got something wrong in that formula. Cause I added those in later. Oh, I see, yeah, I did something, I screwed something up.
So that's why it almost looks like there's a 10% discount.
Oh, okay,
for
but the
doing everything.
difference is, if we only do alternate one, then instead of Kinsale being the low bidder, it's Colfax, the one that's highlighted. So it's depending on which options you choose, there's a different low bidder. So the highlighted, and then for base bid, it was Sean Brown, because even though there was one that was 4,500, it was either Sean Brown or Valor. But even though there's one that's 4,500,
But we wouldn't contract with all different,
no.
right?
But if you only chose the base bid and alternate one, then we'd have to add those up, but I just highlighted which ones, I see what you did.
So the individual columns under total costs for base bid L1, L2, those don't really reflect the actual
The
number.
actual cost.
The total
Right,
is the only one that reflects.
because that, each
That's the
one of them
lowest,
had different
that's the
vendors.
lowest.
But if you, but the total and all except 4 and all except 5 are correct. So I see, yeah, I see where I confused everybody. So like if we did all except number 4, then Sean Brown is the low bidder at 92,797. If we do all except number 5 or the total, then Kinsale is the low bidder.
Makes sense.
So it, I mean, I couldn't really, I probably should have just left those totals off. Originally, I didn't have totals down there, except for the base bid. Yeah, it's just because depending on which alternate I did it based on who the low bidder was for each alternate. But you basically have to add up all the alternates and then look at who the low bidder is, which is what I did under the total column, as well as all except 4 and all except 5.
So what would the true cost be if we went with all of it?
$122,950.
For this
Total of
for
$386,840.
flooring and consultant.
That's the big number.
So what is our capital project fund like after this? I mean, I have the rough figures.
We'll
but-
have, probably 400 to 500, we'll have at least 430,000 remaining. We could have as much as $500,000.
How comfortable do you feel with that? at this point?
I feel relatively comfortable having that much left over.
What's our average unplanned spend that we hit each year?
Well, this past year was probably an exception because we had that water. And that was, what, a couple hundred thousand?
No. For the new water main?
Yeah.
Yeah, with all the water we trucked in, maybe it was. The water main I thought was under 100, but I could be remembering that incorrectly.
Are we expecting any large capital projects coming up in the next year?
Not the next year. Really what we're talking about is the next 3 years. Because capital projects, we don't levy for capital projects. The only way we can get money in there is if we transfer from other funds. So if we have money left over in a transportation, for example, like this year, then you could transfer that into capital projects, and then you can use that money in capital projects on capital projects. But you can't levy for it. We can't go directly to the taxpayers unless you do a referendum.
Right, but we're not expecting, the HVAC's 5 years old, the furnace is
Right.
3 years old. We're not expecting anything like that where we have to go and buy a new HVAC system
No.
this year, unless, a lightning bolt strikes it.
Yeah, the only thing that we
Blows up.
still have out there, HVAC wise, that we're looking at is eliminating the pneumatic system, which is only in the older section of the building. And I believe that cost us about $75,000, and then we're looking to get some rebates from ComEd as well as, think we're Nicor or, we're North Shore, at the two Melbourne buildings is North Shore Gas, I believe. So that's about the only thing that I'm aware of that we're looking at possibly needing to do. I mean, there's a few minor projects here and there.
But there's
But
nothing that's
nothing-
like, hey, we've had it, we've been using
Nothing
it
that's
for 20
gonna
years
use
and
up,
we're holding
you
it
know,
together
400 or
with duct
500,000,
tapes and,
yeah.
you know, rubber bands.
No,
Lots of duct tape.
not at this point.
Okay.
And all of the really old roofs have been replaced. The roof on this section of the building is the oldest at about 21 years.
Did we do the gravel roof? over the
No,
gym?
we didn't do that. That's the other one that's
That's
still
the-
out there. Yeah, the east gym, the roof on the east gym hasn't been replaced yet, but everything else has been.
From what
We
year?
did do a repair on the east gym roof to do the, what's it called? Not the abutment, but,
Yeah, I know what it is.
there was a part where it had separated and you could see down in there, so we replaced that probably 6 or 7 years ago.
On average, how much are we able to transfer into the capital fund?
You know, that varies
Is it
so
final?
much
Is that,
by what else is going on.
I mean, in all likelihood, it's gonna continue to be less and less each year,
I would
unless
assume
we get a
zero.
lot more money from the
this
state.
year?
I assume zero moving forward.
So that 500K has to last us a while.
Well, yes. So here's my strategic thought process 5-year plan. There's the work that needs to be done is not emergency work, but if you'll walk out here and see the tiles in this main hallway, we have to do something with the flooring in this building. It's falling apart. And it looks horrible. And they're crumbling in the main hallway for sure on the first floor. So that's gonna have to be done, and as we can see by this bid, it's not cheap. Won't be asbestos removal, but replacing it's still expensive. It's a lot of square footage. So anyway, that's gonna have to be done within the next 5 years, I would say. The next opportunity that we would have to go to the taxpayers to get money for those kinds of improvements, and maybe we wanna look at improving different spaces, like maybe the library spaces and upgrading, or a STEM lab at the middle school at the same time. And we might ask the taxpayers and say, look, this is what we'd like to do. Your tax bill is going down the following year, so this would be 2024. We're gonna have a significant drop in taxes. Instead of going down $1,500 taxpayers, could we have a couple hundred of that back? And that would allow us to do some of these maintenance projects that are, for our buildings that are at least 20 years old at that point. Because at that point, the middle school will be 20 years old, this building will be 25, 26 years old, the newest part of this building. So there's gonna be things coming up, and we did a master's facility plan that probably needs to be updated again a while back that showed, kind of when things wear out, and we're past the wear date on certain things like the tile in the hallway.
Okay.
There's gonna be expenses,
Yeah.
but that's gonna be beyond $500,000. $500,000 doesn't go very far when you're talking about replacing all of the flooring at one level of one school or a roof, or much of anything,
Yeah.
Are there any,
but not in the next 3 years.
are there any known federal grants for asbestos abatement?
No, not really.
No. Oh, that's
That would be
interesting.
nice.
Yeah, that would make sense.
The other thing we kind of hope for is if we have projects that are kind of in the queue, maybe sometimes the federal stimulus money says, hey, if you have shovel-ready projects,
Mm-hmm.
go for it in schools. Kind of wait for that, and the state might do something like that.
Yeah, well, like last year, we got
Matching
50,000 toward the parking lot that we did.
50,000 for the parking lot.
Yeah.
The roofs, we got some money for as well. I think we had 50,000.
I think we used
on
some of
one
that,
the
yeah, I
roofs.
think that was the time before when they gave us, capital money.
Mhm. So things come up, and it's nice to have, but you have to have cash ready for that to take advantage sometimes, so. To answer, that was a long answer to a short question.
Sometimes that happens.
But no, I'm not anticipating anything major, and I'm not super comfortable. But I'm somewhat comfortable with what we have, and that, really what we're gonna have about is $1 million to get us through at least the next 3 years of anything major going on, and hopefully that'll last well beyond that.
Okay.
We should be smart on how we vote on it, right? For me, I'm inclined to go with all except 4 and 5, because that 1, 2, and 3 and the base bid takes care of a large continuous area, and it helps us retain about $240,000.
Right.
Which would still be available next year if we chose to go down this path, if it's not used up on something else. So instead of the 400 to 500 left, we'd have 6 to 750. 650 to 750.
Have we used Kinsale before?
Yeah, they're actually the ones who did the lower level, and compared to, and we can't let this enter into a decision about what we do, but Colfax was the one that did the other area that we had all sorts of issues with, where they were pulling people off the job, and it took, that was actually delayed. Kinsale pretty much was right on target with what the spec said as far as their timing of getting in and out. So, I mean, I'm pretty comfortable with them.
What about Hussar?
I never used them before, or Sean Brown. I don't think the consultant met with both of those and didn't have any concern. Trying to look at if we did. Yeah, all except 4 and 5, then Hussar would be the one.
So you're thinking that saving money for it might happen is worth risking the only reason that I hesitate with going with that option is that, like, we know this will be an issue if something happens. Like, we know if there's water damage in those areas, we're gonna have to deal with asbestos.
There's a
And
whole
so-
lot of that, yeah.
And so then we're holding back on spending money because of the what ifs, but then we're,
Just as we have for all the years leading up to this year.
I mean, the oldest section of the flooring is 61 years old. No, 60 years old, because it was, it's the original flooring from 1961.
That's the thing,
Which,
the flooring is
it's
tough
really,
as
you know,
nails, it's just the
considering
bottom.
we had the 2 rooms in that 61 edition that we had to remove and replace tile at one end of 2 classrooms. You know, I can go either way. I mean, it has lasted. You know, I guess the other thing I might mention is if you do, pull up that map again. Can you do that easily?
No. Nothing. There it is.
These are the highest risk of airborne asbestos, those in like heavy traffic areas, like the hallway.
It's only if the asbestos tile is damaged. If it's, you know, like it has been, then there's no issue. And then scroll down to the next one. So, you know, if you want to talk about continuous areas, this purple area, which is alternate 4, there's a doorway, and then that continues on the same level, whereas alternate 4 is a level up. And that's one that some of the contractors were concerned about.
Alternate 5, right?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, alternate 5. Yeah, alternate 4 is on the same level as the others. They're just when Spectrum was here, they installed a doorway. Originally, it was continuous, and there were no doors there, right?
No, there were no.
Which surprises me, but they added doors. So I'm okay with just doing the section above, like you said, all except 4 and 5, or I could also see where it might be advantageous to do, to include alternate 4, but not alternate 5.
So sorry, how does alternate 4 fit in with the above?
It's right here on the end. It's right there. See the doorway?
Got it.
So it's right
This
there.
space, and and going on, there's 1, 2, 3 more classrooms.
Okay.
Not
Yeah,
sure.
and basically, scroll back up again, see where the purple stops, there's another section of hallway beyond that, and then there's the boiler room. So we're looking at, not where the asbestos tile is, but just on the other side of that is where they'll actually be entering, and they'll have their decontamination shower there, and then they'll take the asbestos tile out through the boiler room. So that's all connected to that same area.
Is there asbestos in the boiler room?
No,
So how much are we really saving in the consulting fees by doing it in one shot?
Well, if we do all except 5, we would be saving 80,000. Oh, sorry, that's flooring.
20.
no, you'd be saving 6,000 on the consultant costs. If you did everything except 4 and 5, you'd be well, it would be $10,000 less. So,
And flooring's where it gets you, right? You
Yeah.
can't be-
but then if you come back, you know, assuming the pricing was the same, then it would be like, it would be 14 or 15,000 probably if you combine that. So realistically, this, you know, what it will cost when you come back again is gonna be in the $15,000 range for the consultant.
And it's required to, have a new evaluation from a consultant every time, if we already know what's
Well,
going
they
on.
have to monitor the project. It all goes through Illinois Department of Public Health. And you have to have somebody from a consulting company on site monitoring the work and there are air samples that are taken and analyzed, et cetera, on a daily basis.
I'm just asking, so if we said, hey, this is now a 5 or 6 tier project that we wanna face throughout, they couldn't develop a project plan and stay on for one consulting fee through the whole time,
Well, except it wouldn't be continuous. It would be,
every summer?
yeah, because they've got, you know, for the
Right.
length of the project, they have to have somebody on site. So the cost isn't gonna change
I understand.
based on that. But I'm okay really with anything.
So in that alternate 4, I'm picturing that area, and I know we're saying old materials as tough as nails, but is it in good condition? I mean, are we saying, oh yeah, it's in pristine condition, it's 60 years old, but it's looking great?
It's not necessarily in bad condition. There's probably, I haven't really examined every square inch of it, but overall it's in halfway decent condition. I'm not concerned about it unless it would be damaged.
Yeah, most of it's pretty good. It's ugly.
It's ugly, but,
And then if it's damaged, it'd be covered by insurance.
right, but then you have the,
Are there areas that are more probable, to have damage? So this was caused by the HVAC pipes leaking. Is there any kind of consideration here? Areas that
well,
are more.
every classroom has
Has it,
ventilators,
right?
so they all
So
have
it's
the
all the same.
potential of having, a coil that might burst and hot water, going across the floor.
That or the shifting, as Steve was saying earlier,
Right.
when the foundation shifts, but that, don't anticipate much more of that.
It's relatively
Shifting.
stable.
So you complete the entire level, including 4,
For 255.
base through 4, yeah. So at least you're 130,000 then,
Yeah.
less than the total of completing the second floor.
I'm leaning towards that one.
So which
It's
one?
all one level,
All
all
except
except 5. So,
That's the only second floor, is 5.
yeah.
No, 4, 5 is
Yeah.
the second floor.
And how old is the roof in that section?
The roof,
Oh, that roof
Yeah.
is pretty new.
that's new, yeah.
Well, within the last, we've done it all in the last 10 years.
So the potential of leaking from the roof would be low.
Yes. Correct. Well, never know.
Yeah,
So
there's
you're
That's
promising,
why.
you're making the
Yes.
promise
That-
right now, you're swearing.
That's why.
The roofs always leak, it's just a matter of how bad they leak.
Roof leaks haven't caused floor tile damage.
No.
It takes we usually catch those pretty quick, cause you can see the tile, you know.
It's more the
It's a
hot
slow
water
drip.
coming from the univent that
Right,
Okay.
causes the damage.
yep. When it's left overnight or on a weekend, when we don't catch it quickly, typically. Never say never, but the chances are pretty small, so.
So all except 5 would leave how much square foot of asbestos tile in the second floor still?
Let me look.
About that much.
Alternate 4 has,
That much.
I'll accept what you see there, you're right.
Perfect.
I mean, based on the amount of flooring that
Do
you
not
gotta buy,
scale.
it's a fairly significant amount.
Yeah, it's five
It's like a third of.
classrooms, that's a lot. Yeah.
oh, the, alternate 5 is 4,497 square feet.
And the total project is?
You know, I had that added up earlier,
See, 3 times that?
13,000 something, 13,300 or something if you did everything.
Is the floor on the second floor original up there? Yep.
It's original, but that section was built after, that was built later than the original building was built. It was like the 3rd edition, I think.
Yes.
Off the top of your guys' head, is there any known damage spot, or is it generally in better shape than the?
The stairs are not material we're worried about, right?
No, the
No,
stairs,
correct,
yeah,
yeah.
the stairs are fine.
They have those rubberized treads with little
Mhm.
circles on them.
It's just once you get onto the upper level, then all that tile, any of the 9-inch square tiles are all asbestos. And then the mastic or the glue that holds them down also has asbestos in
It's in pretty good shape.
it. Yeah, it's not in bad shape.
We can't.
An ugly tile lasts for.
And I'll be very honest, I would be more comfortable if we either do, all but 4 and 5 or all except 5, because then I'm more comfortable that even though they're telling me they can do it all before school starts, I'm more comfortable that they would get it all done if we don't include that level, you know, the alternate 5.
Right.
As opposed to doing it all at once?
They're not doing it, they're doing it in 2 stages no matter what.
Okay.
So, maybe it would help looking at it this way. So if we went with, let's say we went with all but 5, and then a year from now, that second floor floods and we have to replace that. What is an incremental amount that we have to pay extra from what we would have paid today? Right, an extra 10K? Like, it's not, I would rather keep that money in the bank and then pay an extra 10K later
Yeah.
than use it right now and then have to save it and have to scrounge and find it if we need to in a year, 2 years.
And the cost per square foot looks very high on alternate 5 compared to all but 5.
Well, and part of that is there isn't an elevator and there's, at least what I gathered from the pre-bid meeting with the vendors, they actually have to get their machines up the steps and down the steps. And I know one of the machines they talked about is like 1,000 pounds.
Yeah.
And they weren't real happy that we didn't have an elevator that they could use to get their equipment up there. Now Kinsale did the lower level and they built a ramp system to get that equipment up and down and we didn't hear any concerns about that. But at the pre-bid, there were 2 or 3 of the vendors that seemed to be concerned about that, and I'm guessing that's part of why there's more cost, but also the, upper level there is more square feet too. You have basically the equivalent of
Actually, yeah,
6
it's not,
classrooms, because
not
there's
too
one
far
that's a
off.
double classroom.
yeah, so I had to subtract all 5 from the total,
Yeah.
so it's not too far off.
The difference between all of it and all except 5 is like 130 grand,
Yeah.
right? And if we do 4, or if we do 5 later, we still have to do the consulting fee, so that,
You still have the consulting fee, and you know, I don't know, you know, you never know when you do bids, what pricing
Right.
you're gonna get. I mean, even if you just look at, like on all except 5, it ranged from 83,950 to 178,780.
Would you say, or can you gauge whether the demand is really high right now for flooring contractors?
Well, the asbestos abatement, at least when I talked to the consultant when we first did the bid, you know, most of the contractors had already blocked out and had jobs that were gonna take them through June.
Yeah.
But a lot of them didn't have jobs yet for July, so that's why he felt that we could get good bids and be
Okay.
able to do that. But ideally, you'd probably wanna be bidding this stuff in January, February, as opposed to waiting till May to do it.
Yeah.
Just because of the fact that, the earlier you bid, basically companies are gonna book out their, projects for the summer. And they wanna get those as early as possible, and once they have their jobs, they may bid, but like, you know, where we got this high bid, if they've already got jobs and they're full, then that means they have to go out and pull in other employees that maybe they wouldn't, you know, pull people in from the union hall or whatever. So then it is a little bit more hassle for them.
What's your opinion on doing all but 4 or 5 versus all but 5? Because I'm leaning all but 5 now.
Yeah, I can go either way. The only thing that I'm looking at is, because that containment area is gonna be down just on the other side of that purple hallway,
Mhm.
they can use the same containment area
Just keep going.
for all of that and keep going. Whereas if you wait and do it later, then you're
Yeah.
gonna have to have a containment area on that side and then one on the other side for that alternate 5.
Or just block off where that.
Yeah, except then that means that, you know, the business office has to move again. You're basically
Yeah.
creating a situation. Now, when we did do the upper level and the STEM lab, basically they had their shower close to the, that alternate 5, and then once they got through that decontamination area, then they just walked down the hallway and went into, I think they had another area where they could enter, but they only had the one shower set up. So it's possible that you could still do it and have one area, and then, you know, they would extend into that hallway a little bit, but it wouldn't necessarily keep everybody else from being able to function in that area. So like I said, either way, but to me, it makes sense to do at least, you know, the base bid plus alternate 1, 2, and 3. And that's initially how I started looking at it. And then when the consultant, then I emailed her, when the consultant came, I said, well, what would it be if we added, this and this? Because that was kind of an afterthought, because then I started looking at, well, there's only 2 more sections of asbestos flooring that are left. But you are right, that does give you a little bit more cushion for the next 3 or 4 years if you only do this section that's right there.
130, say?
130, if you do all but 5, 130, 240 if you do all but 4 and 5. But doing 1, 2, 3, and 4 gives you all that floor done.
Yeah. Definitely think it's beneficial to get rid of as much as we can while they're in there. So I guess I would favor all except 5. I mean, ultimately, I would like to get it all just out of the building and not have to think about it ever again. But, I mean, an extra $130,000 could essentially help another situation like like this, right?
Yeah, if everything since March 2020 has taught us anything, the unexpected can happen. Right?
You don't know what's coming.
There have been a few unexpected since then.
Do you have any additional thoughts? Anybody? Anybody prepared to make a motion on what they'd like to do?
Make a motion to do everything but the alternate 5.
Second.
Is that a sufficient vote? Are we good?
Do we have to do that in closed session?
No.
No. Because this was a public bid, they're just discussing it.
Ms. Foss,
Yes.
Mr. Coleman,
Yes.
Mr. Gray,
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen,
Yes.
Mr. Petterini,
Yes.
Mr. Quinones,
Yes.
Mr. Murphy is absent. The motion passed.
Alright, and that was, both action items combined into one motion, right? We're good? Alright, do we have a motion to adjourn the special meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Do we need a roll for that or no?
No.
No?
For adjournment.
We're waiting on me then?
I wasn't sure. I was waiting for
I thought
Veronica.
Veronica was gonna say something.
Exaggerate the
we're
split
adjourned.
between the meetings.
No, you need to have a voice vote, so, all those in favor?
All those in favor?
Yay.
Aye.
All those opposed?
All those opposed? Anybody?
Motion
Alright,
carries.
we're done. Alright, does anybody need a break before we do the cow meeting? No? Okay. Think that,
Wait, so this wasn't even the real meeting?
no. This
No.
was the pregame. The cow's the game, and then the closed session is the after party. Alright, so I'd like to call the, committee of the whole meeting, June 14th, to order. I don't think we need another roll, 'cause we're also here, or pledge. Don't have any public comments since last time. Does anybody have any addition of information discussion items that they'd like added to the agenda? No. Alright, so information discussion, first thing is summer school update, Jason?
Okay, summer school, tomorrow will be the halfway point. After tomorrow of summer school already, it's moving fast. But kids are settling in into a nice routine and, went quick. And so everything seems to be going so smooth so far, and we haven't permanently lost any children, so this is very good.
That's good, that's good news. Anybody have any, questions on that? Alright, district goals?
So district goals I put on just as to see if anybody had comments. I sent those out with, the board notes on Friday. And each of those, on the goals, let me see if I can, just a second here. I'm thinking ahead, you guys move too fast.
Oh, everyone can see my notes, good. Wrote nothing nasty. You had it was up there, right? I had made a copy that says boss notes, but it was up there.
Just curious, off topic while you're looking there. So you said the capital projects probably won't see an influx of funds in the foreseeable future, barring a referendum. What's our track record like with passing referendum?
I don't know.
But this is a unique case, right? 'Cause our taxes would be going down,
Yeah.
so it's like, let's make them go down a little bit less than they otherwise would have. I think people are more amenable to that versus shutting out an extra $400.
How much of that
I
language
do
is
know
on the
that like when
ballot?
Lake Villa did,
Yeah.
when Lake Villa did theirs though, remember initially was it Plebeiat that caused all the excitement? So So you do have to be very careful of what you put in to the project that you say you're going to do. When they did it the second time and reduced the amount and changed what they were gonna do, then they passed it the second time.
Yeah, it's very hard to predict. I only know that I think Dr. Menzer passed 3 in his tenure here, 3 separate ones, and then 1 failed, and then the last one passed, so, in the last 20 years,
I was gonna say, I don't think we've had one in a while.
2013.
2013, yeah.
And that was crisis,
That was a crisis,
which, I mean, this is better. It's not a crisis situation.
right, but it could become, you know, if it depends on what the referendum is. In general, building referenda pass easier than operating fund referenda, because operating fund is, you know, kind of that everything that goes into salaries and benefits and also very important, but generally people can touch, see, feel, when they see new paint in the library or new furniture, they go, oh wow, this is great, and my kids will enjoy this, and when it's for other things that's not tangible, it's harder to grasp. So generally, building fund referendums, bricks and mortar, tend to pass on a higher rate. Operating funds are really tough to pass. 2013 was really tough, but we have good community support to do that. So it depends on the climate, what you're asking, how much we're asking for, what type of referendum. Maybe we don't need one at that time. I'm just putting it out there that the next opportunity that we have, I think, is 2024, because definitely no one's gonna vote for any kind of tax increase while our taxes are ramping up with our bonds still in place. I would have a hard time. I would pass it. I would vote yes myself, but it would be painful. And I'm about as strong of a yes person as you can get when it comes to school, so.
It's definitely much easier to pass them though when taxes are going to go down, regardless of, especially if you structure it so that once a referendum, the current debt service goes off, then you're asking for just a small portion of what.
Right.
So they would still see a you know,
Significant.
reduction in their tax bills.
It would be a significant reduction, still, so that would be good. And it depends on for how long and how much, and there'd be a lot of research and thought that would go into that, so.
And typically you
Don't
do
wanna
school
ask for
tours
anything
and
more than we need, that's for sure.
typically you're gonna do tours and things where the public has an opportunity to come see what it is you're looking to do, et cetera.
Yeah. Yep. That's a ways down the road, a little ways
Yeah,
down the road, but
understood.
still to think about, some things to think about when we're talking about how long does that $500,000 have to last? Well, at least until 2024 would be our next opportunity to increase any revenue other than if we got a grant, the state got a grant, or if we went into states in southern Illinois and passed a countywide sales tax of 1 penny that goes back into buildings. That would be great, but that'll never pass in Lake County. It's not even they can't even get on the ballot because a certain percentage of school districts have to put it on the ballot and they can't even, not even close. So, that's probably not gonna happen. So anyway, we're off track. Goals. Just as a quick reminder, priority 1, social emotional health of students and staff. These were goals that we set in the last summer. Student learning, curriculum, safety of students, and finances. So those were our big ideas, and I put notes in here and also linked them to the presentations that we've already presented to the board, so we won't go through each one of those tonight, but just wanted to point out again that they were there.
And that's in preparation for the 2021 goals? As we start developing the 2021?
21 to 22?
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
And
So we can
also-
start thinking about, okay, so where are we at, kind of get a feel for where we're at. I think it would be a good idea to, I sent this out too, to revisit the strategic plan and use that as a jump off point to start thinking about, okay, we're through this pandemic time, all we've been thinking about all I've been thinking about in the last year is masks and
Yeah.
safety and vaccines and one thing after another, and getting kids in safely and restructuring and rescheduling. It's been just a grind. Now we're thinking back to, oh yes, when fall starts, we have school that we have to operate. We want our kids to learn. Now we have to talk about catching kids up with learning. We have to talk about what our standards are. How are we going to integrate our new staff that we hired in, because the world keeps on moving on. So it's a little bit overwhelming again, because now we're kind of restarting back to school without having that ramp up time. So yes.
Yeah, I was thinking about this over the weekend, and I was trying to formulate it in my head, but I think what would definitely need your help is to just kind of start. I'm doing something similar at work right now for a brand plan, so it's like we're doing a SWOT analysis, so it's like something similar, right? What are the key challenges that we're facing going out of COVID and going into 2021-22 school year? Because then that helps us focus our attention and our dollars in the area that we need to focus on, right? And then potentially deprioritize the areas that we're rocking that we don't need to spend as much energy on.
These were goals that were set that you feel like we're wrapping up and you met them, or we're at different stages within them?
I would say different stages for most of them.
The curriculum in particular, about making sure that we had socially responsible curriculum, of course that caught my eye, and just was kind of wondering, do you feel like did you have the room to breathe to take steps on that, or
the
is that
bandwidth or the capacity?
Yeah, that
No.
kind of a back, yeah.
No, I would say that's an ongoing to move forward and needs a lot more discussion.
Yeah.
And since we wrote this goal last year, I think things have changed significantly again. And
Yeah.
things are happening so fast, it's hard to even keep ahead of the discussion, but that is definitely gonna have to be a priority moving forward.
See, I feel like the priorities themselves aren't going to be too different, right? Those are core ones, right? It's just the specific tactics we're going to implement.
Right. And I think I'd like to layer it maybe a little more specifically, point it at least back to our strategic plan, so we can really use that same language and maybe some of these goals and hammer that a little bit more clearly to staff. Because we ended our strategic plan, we finished our strategic plan and then COVID hit and everything else. And not that I haven't gone back to that language and looked at it since, keep it in the back of my head, but I was there.
I was there, it was like 10 years ago.
Seems like, but it was only, there's 20 some of our community members there, between teachers, administrators, and family members, and so the rest of the community doesn't even know that we did it. We haven't really had a kickoff, so kicking that back into place and then referring to it often is going to be important. And we did that 2015 to 2020. That was part of our. It seemed like it was more regular than it is now, at least referring back, and we still didn't do it enough, but that really set the tone and the pace for what we did and why we did things and how we did them.
And these goals were framed post-COVID hitting, and we sat back down and we thought about what are now reasonable adjustments to some of these, and I think we got rid of some entirely, right?
Yeah, we changed them. I mean, number 4 was clearly COVID related. That was all. And we use this. Part of the goals that the board put out was abide by all state and local government guidelines when making decisions about remote versus in-person learning. So we did that. We took the state and local guidelines and said, okay, these are the parameters that we're operating within. How can we still have school? And that's how we came up with our plan. And we stuck with it even when other communities were changing. We said, this was our plan, and we're gonna still follow the state and local guidelines to the best of our ability, even when they changed and were unclear too, so.
I think when we wrote that too, it was before there was much state or local guidelines.
Oh, yeah, there was a need.
We had the foresight to think that there might be at some point.
Well, they said there would be.
We did.
And I wanna reiterate, I think it was very well executed, and I appreciate the commitment that you and leadership had to try and get everyone in person.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, those first couple meetings, we were hoping you guys were medical doctors. Dr. Johns started working on the vaccine. Lab filled out.
Well, the science lab.
Not even close.
That's what they do in the school.
In the STEM lab. That's what it was set up for. Didn't know it at the time. Money well spent.
Anybody have anything else on district goals?
So we'll review those in, closed session tonight when you talk about my evaluation, and moving forward, that's what my evaluation's based on too, so. If we get a chance to look at that.
Yeah, so I guess I should have prefaced that for you guys that are newer. When we discuss these goals and we set them out for the district, then we go back and we kind of discuss in the superintendent evaluation, how did Jason respond to these situations? Was he able to succeed in this goal? Was there a reasonable cause why, this year, for example, why, it's okay that he wasn't able to, and we can kind of use that as a guide. All right, kindergarten reconstruction.
So Mr. Walshire and I met with the kindergarten team a couple of weeks ago, and they came with a proposal that they would restructure how we've been doing things a little bit. They would like, instead of having kindergarten associates, right now they have in every classroom kindergarten associates, and which is a paraprofessional that help them structure their day and work with kids. Instead of hiring we have 5 sections, and instead of hiring those 5 kindergarten associates positions and filling those positions, could we reduce that by 4 and instead hire another teacher to reduce the class sizes and keep them low? And without making any promises of what we can do with that, with class size, because we never know what finances are gonna be like down the road, we said definitely we were interested in that. I personally, and research holds up that that's probably a better way to go, is smaller class sizes versus having another adult in the class. It's more work for the teacher, but there's different trade-offs. So our recommendation is to do that, to hire add a section of kindergarten and reduce the number of kindergarten associates.
What's the expected reduction in the class size? Adding that extra headcount?
Was it 3 or 4 kids smaller? It would depend on the year and depend on our numbers. Mr. Wilshire, do you remember?
Well, yeah, I mean, so far, with the exception of 1 year that we had, under 12, year 15, we've been pretty much averaging about 90, low 90s, in kindergarten. So it's been kind of hovering around that.
Is that over 4 sections?
5.
Mostly 4. We added a 5th section, was that 2 years ago?
I think so.
So,
It's whenever my office moved.
It's whenever he lost his office.
I lost the accounts payable and payroll section.
but the average class sizes have been pretty much in the high teens to low 20s.
Okay.
So with this proposal, we're hoping that we can at least get it down to 15, if not just below that. But again, that's contingent on how many register that
Yeah.
given year, but that's kind of our.
So we'd be moving from 5 to 6 sections.
Correct.
Okay.
So if we have 100 kids, it goes from 20, an average of 20 to an average of 16.6.
That doesn't
To be
seem
that
like a
0.6.
lot, but that is a lot,
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
from a teacher perspective.
20%.
And they're kindergartners, I mean, forget it, like they're no offense, but they're animals, you know what I mean?
So,
Compared to high school students. I mean, that's a huge reduction, like, for teacher load. Like, I think that's a really smart move, because you're one person, you can only do so much at a time, you know what I mean? So, and I think it's easier, like, I've taught with co-teachers, I've had parapros, all that stuff. It's easier when it's just you. So to lighten the number of kids, it makes a lot of sense.
so since there's such high turnover with paraprofessional role, this does not require any sort of layoffs. Can people just be moved, or?
Correct. So
That-
we've offered, we'll take everybody, we'll still have openings next year.
Okay.
So this doesn't require us to lay off any people, which is why now, also, as we're figuring out, and you guys probably know, it's really hard to find people to work at this time in that parapro realm too, and to get good people in, it's a challenge.
So then, will there be a floating
There
paraprofessional?
will be one floating paraprofessional that will help more with materials and organizing and providing support that way, which is a lot in kindergarten.
Yeah.
There's a lot of cutouts and different activities that they do, and to have somebody support the teachers so they don't have to spend all their prep time cutting out hearts for Valentine's Day stuff or leaves in the fall, things like that. And they don't cut them out, they stamp them, but anyway, that would save everybody time.
So given that it was their proposal to do this, you think they'll all be
Oh, yeah.
cohesive with sharing the one?
Yeah, it's pretty much what they did this year, actually.
I was just gonna say, I
They
don't.
really liked it, that's
What we
why.
had this, we only had 2 kindergarten associates this year. Because the other ones either retired, found other jobs, and things like that. And we couldn't find anybody to fill those, so this year they kinda got that taste, and I think when they saw that they were able to, this is nice to have lower class sizes. And I don't have somebody right there that, I could do this on my own too. And plus, they also gave the rationale that those positions are high turnover. Then it's always constantly getting somebody new in there, getting them adjusted to the class and expectations, so they're like, well, I think that's another reason why they would go with this route. It's a good step in the right direction for the company.
It makes a lot of sense.
And we're looking at a $20,000 savings, net savings. It's pretty straightforward.
And I was very clear that, we can't guarantee that we're always gonna have this low of class sizes in the future, because we don't know what the future will bring. But we'll certainly make an attempt. So our target right now is 20 in K through 3. That's the evidence-based model that evidence says right around 20 is your best return on investment as far as teacher to student ratio. In our circumstance, which would be a low rate of low income. If we were in a district with a higher rate of low income, let's say 40% of our students on free and reduced lunch, then we'd be looking at 15 in that K3 group. They find research finds that there's a greater impact in that setting on those kids for learning. But in our setting, 1 teacher per 20 in kindergarten through 3rd is what's recommended. But lower is better, and it does make it easier when you can conference with smaller groups of kids and have fewer groups. So the teacher will get to the kids more.
And even on the evidence-based funding model, although it should be 15, there's still more support in those districts as well.
Absolutely.
That's required as part, or recommended as part of that.
Yep.
So you still have higher numbers.
Yep.
Yeah.
So this is, I'm all for this. I support it 100%, and I think it's great, good move.
Any other thoughts? No. Alright, so moving on to the increase of 1 FTE, adaptive PE.
So we're looking at a 0.1, which is a half of a day increase for our adaptive PE teacher. She's just having a hard time getting all of her kids that on her caseload in. And her caseload, Mr. Rollins, is that almost doubled, I believe, in the last 4 years?
Yeah, I'm looking it up right now. She was around 12 or 13 to begin with, and now it's up to almost 20.
So not quite doubled, but it's a significant increase. And so in order for her to see them, because she sees kids from early childhood through 8th grade in both schools, she's jumping around quite a bit, so.
Could you explain, I mean, what is an adaptive PE?
Adaptive PE is, it's not physical therapy, it's getting kids physically moving with adaptation. So one of my favorite activities, we don't have this at our school, but as an example, an adaptive PE would be something called goal ball. So if you have visually impaired class, you can line up kids on each end of the gym, and there's a ball that's about this big, rubber ball with a bell in it. And as you roll it, it makes a noise. And the visually impaired kids will sense where that ball is and be able to stop it. And the other team is trying to roll it through to hit the wall. It's really fun. And you can play that with typically vision kids. So I played it. It just had blindfold on. So you put a blindfold on some of the kids in the class, and it allows kids to interact and participate, and it allows kids to understand what it is to be blind. But that's just one example of what an adaptive PE teacher can do. They adapt the games, they adapt the physical activities to meet the needs of the student who may be physically impaired.
Okay.
And they help with keeping, for safety, we have students who may have limitations as far as what their range of motion could be, and it helps with the PE teacher to say, hey, they can't, don't let them stretch their arms in a certain position, or be careful when you do, or encourage certain core strength activities to help their core so they can sit up in class better and pay attention. There's all kinds of different activities and reasons why we have adaptive PE.
So what do we have right now? We have one adaptive PE teacher?
It's one person, and she's part-time. She's
Got it.
currently .2.
No, .4, she's 2 days a week, isn't she?
4, yeah, .4, I'm
Yeah,
sorry.
.2 is 1 day.
Yes, 2 days.
So going from 2
.4.
days to 2.5 days a week.
2.5
Okay.
days.
Okay.
So it should be exactly .5 total.
Okay.
Okay, so that'll be on the next agenda for approval. If you have any questions about it, I'm happy to answer them anytime between now and then. The next item is nursing, full-time. We had a nurse assigned this year to a student who was medically fragile in the early childhood program, and that child was only in the building for 3 hours a day. If that, was a very short period of time, but we had the nurse contracted for a full day. So this year, for COVID, we had extra help, which was a blessing. Next year, we won't have that extra help, and not knowing what we're gonna have to do with quarantining or possibly a testing protocol, and anticipating that something is gonna be happening, and it's gonna be a little bit hectic. We're suggesting that we hire her full-time in that role, so.
What about the middle school? Are they fine because they're smaller?
Yes, they may need that support too, so this person could support at the middle school as well as needed. There's times when it's real frantic at the middle school, especially with COVID, and depending on the quarantining rules. The next hurdles that we're gonna have to jump through are the quarantining rules and the mask rules for kids, on spacing, and we just don't know what that's gonna look like in the fall. Especially with us being kids will be more exposed to each other for sure, because we're moving classrooms at the middle school. So what does that mean when one student has COVID, is test positive for COVID, then there's gonna be more contact tracing and trying to figure out who was exposed.
And the nurse is responsible for that?
It's a team effort. It's the principals and the assistant principals and the nurse, and the nurse is responsible for filling out all the paperwork with the county, calling the county to let them know, calling the parents to let them know, keeping track of how many days they have to be out, when they can come back. The nurse does all that.
Are there nurses at each building, or?
Currently, we have one nurse at each building.
Okay.
One equivalent.
Well, we did have instances last year too, where then if somebody was gonna be absent at the middle school, then she would, during that half day that she wasn't working with the student, then she would cover that office at the middle school.
Yep.
Which does make it nice to not have to pull somebody in, sometimes we can get a substitute and sometimes we can't.
Right.
We've actually been more fortunate than a lot of districts in having some of our parents that are nurses that are willing to come in and substitute, but it's not always the case that you have somebody available.
Right.
Has a person been identified? Would it be the person that was here?
That's our preference, and we'll talk about that in closed session tonight as one of our items.
Okay.
Right, the next thing, increase again, asking for more help. This actually, we had slated for an increase 3 years ago, when we first had CEDAL move in more of their classrooms to our buildings. We knew that we were gonna need more tech support, so we pushed the media clerk at that point into a technology position. Well, the media center at the middle school at that time said, I think we can handle it with a half of a person. Originally, we had said, do you want one full-time or a half-time? And they said, I think we can handle it with a half-time, and we'll just fill in with technology as needed. We'll see how it goes. Well, as it turns out, we need more tech than ever. With the way this year went, this year we didn't need it because no one was in the building, and we didn't use there wasn't as much checking out books and circulation in the media center anyway. So this year was fine, but next year there's no way we can do it without a full-time person in the media center. So we're proposing that we increase that back to a full-time position. And that'll be on the next agenda as well.
Think that the current media clerk is interested in going with that, or?
I don't know.
Okay.
I hope so, but I don't know.
Alright. Anybody have any questions on any of that?
So are we gonna cover the other staffing updates as part of the closed session? Okay.
Yeah, anything that has to do with specific contracts and specific negotiations and salaries of individual people, that's discussed in closed session, and then it gets approved. It has to be anything we discuss in closed session then comes out into open session eventually for approval.
Okay.
But while we're negotiating individual people's salaries, and which could lead into a performance review discussion, that's a closed session topic. And or union contracts, which is also going to be discussed.
It'll just be discussed in closed session, so we won't be voting on
No,
anything tonight, so we'll just discuss it and then.
we can't vote on anything tonight anyways.
Yeah, right.
Okay. I do wanna, well, I mean, we can talk about it, the speech pathologist, like, I didn't really understand what we're doing or why we're doing it. So that's just one I wanted to make sure to cover. We're reducing 5.2.
That one I missed on the regular agenda, so we can add that as an added discussion item.
Yeah.
Speech pathologist, and then the part where I can explain the contract in a little more detail before it's approved.
Yeah.
Speech pathologist, we currently have a .2 position, and then we hire that person as a full-time person. We use them for 2 days, actually,
Yes,
sorry.
point four.
Point four. We hire them for 2 days, and then we share that with Antioch, District 34.
So they have 0.6 of that.
They have
That's
0.6 of that
Okay.
person.
They have
and then-
60%, we have 40%.
Then we have an agreement, and agreed that they pay us, but we do all their paperwork and payroll and evaluations and so on. We're proposing that we reduce that to a 0.1. That, the person that was fulfilling that
0.2?
contract is leaving.
Yeah, point two,
0.2, right?
1 day a week.
Yeah, 0.2, that's fine, sorry. One
That's
day.
okay, it's confusing.
Get my days and my points mixed up. So we're reducing the 0.4 to 0.2, going from 2 days down to 1 day a week, so Antioch would share 4 days a week.
That's because we feel that there's a decreased demand in a pathologist? Because I also saw your note on, well, the second part of it I didn't understand, right? Where we would only do this if we can hire someone, it's difficult to find a speech pathologist, which seems contrary to why we lessening the amount of time that we have with a speech pathologist now.
Because we have a reduced need, at least at the
Okay.
beginning of the school year next year.
Got it.
So our caseloads have gone down a little bit from the last time when we hired her. So our caseloads are going down. But we still want to have that person available to help us because we're anticipating next year that, there will be more evaluations, special education evaluations.
Mm.
And even if they don't end up, if a student doesn't end up needing speech, they still are gonna be evaluated by a speech pathologist at some point to rule some things out. So
Right.
we know that they're probably gonna be busier than we anticipate, so we still want the 0.2, 1 day a week, available for us to fill in some of those gaps.
I mean, historically, we had a full-time person who retired or left the district
Yeah.
that initially we weren't going to replace, and then we found that we needed to have somebody, so that's when we entered into the agreement with Antioch, where we did 2 days a week and they did 3.
Well, what if we find that we do have that need, but we've given up that 0.2 to Antioch?
We have to
then
make it through 1 year.
We have to
and
make it
then-
through 1 year.
Then we reevaluate the next year.
And actually, we'll probably, if we change that, we'll need to redo the intergovernmental agreement
Right.
that we have with Antioch. And it has I think it's February 1st, there's a date in there that if we're wanting to change the agreement, that we have to notify the other party, and then we would negotiate
Okay.
something different.
Does
But at the
Antioch
time that we
want
were
one?
able to hire somebody, Antioch hadn't been able to find a speech person.
So they want that
Okay.
extra time.
They want the
so-
extra time.
They want whatever we can
They
give
can
them.
go.
Okay.
I don't know if it's gonna be possible to find someone. That's the trouble. Was my comment.
Got it, so we have that time right now, but we don't have someone to fill it. Alright,
Can we get in trouble in any way for having that position vacant for too long?
it's a service that we're providing to students, right?
Yeah, no. As long as we're providing services. So our backstop would be if we can't hire someone, we would have to contract for service through a company
Hmm.
for lots of money.
Mm.
That gets very expensive.
And we have done that for maternity leaves.
We have done it.
Cause of the
But we'd rather-
IGA, does Antioch have to agree to the person, or
If we contract out the IGA,
the IGA is employed?
yeah, we would fulfill that.
Alright.
Because they're doing the same thing, but they're just trying to save money because every day that they can get from us is less they have to pay in contract service.
Which district?
34,
34.
yeah. So it'd be Oakland, no, not Evans. Evans is 36, 33, Evans is
Yeah, 33, I think.
34 is, Oakland and Antioch Elementary and Hillcrest and Petty and Upper Grade. It's not Antioch Elementary anymore, it's something else.
Change the name of Antioch Elementary
Yeah, it's Mary Kay McNeil Early Learning Center.
to public school. It's like the museum one, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Alright. Anything else on any of that?
Didn't miss any others.
Alright, on to future agenda items. Press policy update?
They're always coming.
So, can we skip the phone system update?
Phone system.
Yeah.
Should we talk about?
Yeah, we have
That's
nothing
a
more to
right,
talk
that's a
about.
passenger.
I
here.
did have a vendor that called me today and I said I can talk to you in a couple of weeks, I can't deal with it today. So we do have people who are interested in, you know, talking to us about a phone system.
Sorry, just real quick on that, we have those dollars set aside, and that's not gonna impact our capital.
Correct, that's in life safety.
Okay.
And the way the life safety plan was written, once we completed everything else, then we could use then we could use the money for a phone system. So we do have, I believe, enough money in the life safety fund that should pay for the phone system.
Okay.
Yeah, so that's a separate fund and separate dollars.
Alright, approval of the district consolidated plan.
Yeah, that and the grants, that's all tied together. We have to do a consolidated plan and then you do each of the individual grants.
That's for the next meeting?
Yeah, we'll
It's
have
a
to,
future
yeah.
meeting.
Well, no, will have to be because they need to be done by June 30th.
Yes.
In order, they have to be done prior to July 1 in order for us to start spending money on July 1.
Is that, we meet on the 28th?
Yeah, we meet on the 28th.
Okay.
And in addition to that, there's also the IDEA and the preschool early childhood grant as well.
Okay. Any questions on? Comments? Alright, so, coming up, the approval for the school lunch fees going up.
And that one's in kind of, not necessarily name only, but all of next year, all the school lunches are gonna be at no cost to the
Right.
students. But they are recommending that we go ahead and increase the fees for next year, even though we won't be charging them. So then we'll have that to look at for the following year as far as, basically the federal government requires us to increase because the cost of meals still is going up, but they require us to increase it because they want the cost that a person without free or reduced status pays is gonna be equivalent to what that meal cost is. They don't want that to be less than what the federal government reimburses the district. So there's a whole calculator and thing that we have to do to determine what our rate is gonna be for the following year. So they're just recommending that we increase it by 10 cents per meal for next year, and then we'll use that calculator the following year. That sounds stupid, but that way you're only raising it 10 cents next year, and then you have to raise it a nickel or whatever the following year, then it's not gonna seem like as big of an increase.
Does make sense. Any questions on that at all? A lot of that info is in the email. Alright, appoint the district treasurer and approve the treasurer's bond in the amount of $6 million. Give us a little background on that.
The district treasurer is currently Gary White, and basically, he and Dr. Lind have the ability to sign our district checks, as well as and the district treasurer then also works with assisting in monitoring investments and those kinds of things. And we do have that as a separate position. Typically, the bond is in the largest amount of cash that we think we'll have available at any one time. So it's basically a way to if somebody ran off with, if he would run off with that money or whatever, put it in send it overseas or whatever, then we have a guarantee that we can get that back. And currently our amount that we have available most of the time is around $6 million. Our previous bond was for $5 million.
And so this is just a resident that's appointed, or is it staff?
He's technically a staff member, he's appointed as the district treasurer and receives the stipend.
He's our former business manager.
Hmm.
He's our former Dr. John's,
Right.
sort of.
Like two people ago.
Two people.
And I do have, if you want, I can send you, I've got information about, what a district treasurer does. I think we have a job description. But it is something that, he's done a good job with that, and I'd be recommending that he continue. And then that bond has to be approved by the board, signed by the board, and then I have to file it with the Regional Office of Education. And I've already contacted the insurance company to have that bond issued, so I'm just waiting on it to arrive. But this is an annual process that we do every June.
Why? Well, I mean, why can't we, why are we continually approved, why can't we offer him like a 5-year contract or something?
I think it's in the school code.
I think you have to do it each year.
I think it's a yearly,
Yeah,
it's one of those
just,
things.
just
that
like
we-
we appoint the
Yeah.
attorney and everything, we do
Yeah, we
that
have to
once a year.
reappoint certain things, there's certain, I think, I could look that up, John.
Yeah, I think you're right, though.
But I think there's certain things that you have to do on a annual basis, and that's one of them.
Do you have to take an oath of office?
I don't know. I don't
I think
remember
there
ever
may be
doing an
something
oath
in
of
the
office.
bond itself that, because he has to sign the bond as well as the board has to sign the bond. So I think I'd have to go back and look at the previous year's bond even to see what's in it.
I think my guess is that it's a process that protects taxpayers, so.
Yeah.
Look at it yearly, so it's not, you don't want a lifetime person who no one ever examines or rethinks about.
Are we able to discuss the stipend in open session?
In closed session, it's on
Closed
our list.
session?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's on the list.
Okay. Is there any sort of obligation as a district just to be transparent to post it every so often, since the same person's held that role for so long?
Well, I can tell you it's very difficult to find people willing to do that job. When our previous treasurer decided he was gonna retire and move to Arizona, I think he moved. It took us a while to find somebody willing to take on that, because it's kind of an extremely part-time position. Maybe you see that person once or twice a month for a few hours, and that's about it. You could post it, but if we were gonna post it, we would need to do it probably like February or March, so that you know whose name you're gonna put on because the bond is actually issued in the treasurer's name. And it can be reissued with a different name, but that's another hoop to jump through. So that's something if you did wanna, but typically, most districts, if you have somebody who's doing a good job, it's basically just having another set of eyes that's monitoring. We have a lot of these things that are, that's why I can't sign checks. That's why it's only Jason and Gary, because that's another layer of security to keep me from stealing money or misappropriating money, because it's somebody else to monitor. And any check over, is it 8,000 or 10,000, we have to actually have it hand signed. We can't run it through we can't run it through so it automatically puts a signature on there. And then he also reviews each of the bills payable. He matches the invoice up to the check to make sure that they match. And,
Basically, somebody taking responsibility for the fund balances and transactions of the district.
I'm familiar with Mr. White, and I'm extremely comfortable knowing that he's like, if you met him, you'd be like, oh yeah, this is like, man, look, model of integrity. I'm very comfortable.
No, I'm just asking a lot of questions because I don't recall knowing about this before. I'm sure it's been.
and it is it is something that I don't think we've ever discussed before, since you've been on the board.
Yeah.
But
I believe this is not my first June. Should have been aware. Alright, approval of budget transfers?
Yeah, that's something that will be, for next, week. The transfers are actually listed on the amended budget that I did, but basically it's interest transfers, and unfortunately those are much less than even what I estimated they might be a year ago, or last September when we adopted the budget. But you do the transfers of interest to the fund most in need. I also have on there to do some transfers from the transportation fund to the O&M fund, and then to the capital projects fund. And I'm gonna relook after tomorrow's payroll, just to see, to make sure that everything that I put in that amended budget is still on target. So I may make a few adjustments between now and then. I actually am kind of toying if I want to move any of that money I'd allocated for O&M and capital projects into the ed fund as well. So I'll be looking at that, and then we'll discuss that, next week when we do the budget hearing. But I'll kind of have listed out any changes that I'm recommending from what the budget was that we put on public display. But I wouldn't expect many changes to occur. It's just, I may modify those transfers, and if I see an area that I know that even with this summer program, we've ended up with a couple extra positions that I hadn't been aware of, that we weren't aware of until we were almost ready to start the summer school program. So just to kind of make sure that I have enough money allocated that we won't end up in the negative. And we also I put contingencies in there too, so I can probably just adjust the amount in that contingency fund as well. But I'll detail all that out and send it to you, so you're aware of anything that I might recommend changing.
Alright, so that kind of bled right into the amended budget and the public hearing. Do you have anything else you wanna?
No,
No?
nothing else.
Any questions for Dr. Johns on the transfers or the budget hearing? Alright, Jason, do you have a superintendent's report?
nothing additional to report.
Dr. Johns? We've already covered all your favorite topics.
I think if there is anything else that was in the report that I emailed all of you, but I think we've covered most everything that was in there. The biggest piece of it was the asbestos, and then I think I put in there, we've gotten 2 of the spring property tax payments from the county, one in May and then one in June. And the county has went back to only having 2 payments instead of last year we had 4 payments. So it's now gonna be June and September are the due dates.
But if I calculated it right, we collected 99.6% of our property taxes last year.
Really, 99.6, 99.7, something like that.
So in retrospect, then, with most people being on a, in a system where they're paying their lender, we didn't experience too much of the delay with the breaks.
Yeah, not really. We did have, some payments. I mean, the latest we've ever gotten payments, I think we got some in the final payments in either March or April this year, whereas ordinarily we would have gotten our final payments in like January. So, it did delay it. Luckily, the interest rate, I don't wanna say luckily, but because the interest rates are so low, it didn't make as big of an issue, but I am glad they went back to the 2 payments. Because that allows us, once we get that money, once interest rates start to rise, then we'll be able to earn interest on that money for a longer period of time. That's really the only thing that going with the 4 payments did, is it stretched out so we didn't get as much cash all at once. But we did still get the bulk of it in a timely fashion, just because any of the banks that did the escrow accounts, typically, those are the payments that a lot of times we got, like in May or early June. But we'll still get another 3 or 4 or 5 payments from this June payment as well, so.
Okay. So you said the treasurer's office said for sure they're not doing that?
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, I did get notification that there's only gonna be 2 payments this year.
Yeah.
Or 2 homeowners will, or, taxing homeowners and businesses will only make 2 payments. I think it's June 7th, and then the other one, I believe, is in early September.
Yes, the fall.
Yeah, it's either, pretty sure it's September.
Okay. Dr. Johns, does anybody have a board report?
Not a report, but just regarding the treasurer, the reason why this is looked at annually, it found in 2-110, policy 2-110, and then the other responsibilities are in 480.
That's school code?
It's for the policy, yeah.
Okay. Thanks, Sean. Anybody else? I mean, I don't have anything, either. So if nobody has anything else, I'd be looking for a motion, to adjourn to closed sessions.
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn closed session.
Do I have to read this before we get a motion? Or after?
Yes, you have to read, that is the motion. You have to
So I
say-
make the motion.
You can say, I need a motion to adjourn to closed session for the following
Okay.
reasons, and then read that whole thing.
And then, so we're
Then
gonna
you say
strike,
so
moved.
we're gonna strike Sean's motion for the moment. Alright, so I need a motion, to adjourn to closed session, for the purpose of, reason 1, within the Open Meeting Act expectations, the appointment, employment, compensation, discipline, performance, or dismissal of specific employees of the public body or legal counsel for the public body, including hearing testimony and a complaint lodged against an employee of a public body or against legal counsel for the public body to determine its validity. However, a meeting to consider an increase in compensation to a specific employee of a public body that is subject to the Local Government Wage Increase Transparency Act may not be closed and shall be open to the public and posted and held in accordance with this act, ILCS 120-2C, section 1, and also for reason 2 of the Open Meeting Act exceptions, collective negotiating matters between the public body and its employees or their representatives, or deliberations concerning salary schedules for one or more classes of employees, citing Illinois Constitution 120-2C, section 2. Could I have a motion?
Can you repeat that?
What was that?
You guys didn't hear that back?
So moved.
You guys can get out anyway.
Second.
Alright, do we need a roll call, Veronica?
We do?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah, we're in closed session. Ms. Boss?
Yeah.
Mr. Coleman?
Yes?
Mr. Gray?
Yes.
Mr. Lorenzen?
Yes.
Mr. Pederini?
Yes.
Mr. Quinones?
Yes.
We're in closed session.
Right.
It is closed session.
Okay, we will not be, taking any further action tonight, so, I'm gonna turn off the public face.